Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Our presentation about the psychodynamic approach. The psychodynamic approach, the idea that people's aggressiveness might stem from an inherited instinct, was taken in a driven direction by a Viennese physician Sigmund Freud, who began to work about 15 years after the founding of Wundt Laboratory. Freud at first assumed that normal and abnormal behavior and mental process have a physical cause somewhere in the nervous system. But Freud worked with people whose physical ailments had no apparent physical cause, led him to create a new theory and form a treatment called psychoanalysis. His ideas are the foundation of the psychodynamic approach, which hold that all behavior and mental process reflect constant and mostly unconscious struggles within each person. Usually, this struggle involves conflict between the impulse to satisfy instinct or wish for food, sex, or aggression, for example, and the restriction imposed by society. From this perspective, a display of violence or hostility or even anxiety reflects the breakdown of civilizing defense against the expression of primitive urges. The behavioral approach. In 1913, while Freud was pursuing his psychodynamic approach and gaining favor among American psychologists, a Harvard psychology professor named John B. Watson published a book called Psychology as a Behaviorist Views It. In it, Watson urges psychologists to ignore mental events, conscious as well as unconscious, and study instead only what they could observe directly. By focusing on observable or overt action, said Watson, psychologists would not have to rely on people potentially distorted reports about themselves. He also argued that environmental influence, the things that happen after birth, are paramount in shaping who people are and what they do. From the occasional and unpredictable reward it brings, Skinner's contribution helped behaviorism maintain in 1950s and 1960s the dominant position in psychological research it had enjoyed in the United States since the 1920s for some psychologists. However, behaviorism near exclusive focus on overt action made incomplete. They argued that we can never fully understand the nature of violence, altruism, or any other behaviors, for that matter, without learning something about the thoughts that accompany them. Since the 1970s, many behaviorists have come to endorse the cognitive behavioral view, which adds the study of reportable mental process to the traditional behavior emphasis on overt behavior. Thus, the cognitive behavioral approach explores how learning affects the development of thought and beliefs, and how in turn these learned cognitive patterns affect overt behavior. B.F. Skinner was the most notable contemporary champion of the behavioral approach to psychology. In spite of his reputation for being interested in only behaviors, Skinner recognized that mental events took place and could be important, but argued that they could not be studied directly. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Maniac, 나서 빠진 것처럼 미쳐 maniac. 빙빙 돌아버리겠지. Maniac, Frankenstein처럼 걸어 maniac.